Imagine getting accepted into your dream U.S. university, only to have your offer revoked days before classes start, with zero explanation. That is the new reality for hundreds of students as a quiet crackdown sweeps across American campuses. Welcome to China Uncovered. Today, we're diving into why top U.S. colleges are suddenly slamming the door on China and the national security fears driving this massive shift. Purdue University, one of the most influential public research universities in the United States, has hit major headlines. It is reportedly freezing the admission of students from China. The sudden announcement caused a massive stir among students planning to study abroad. Purdue's president is Chinese-American and once served as a technology advisor to former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. With Purdue, a top STEM university, taking the lead in halting admissions from China, many expect other schools to follow suit. Not long ago, faculty members from several Purdue departments disclosed that their graduate program directors received a list of high-risk countries. Departments were told to reject applicants from China, Russia, Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, and North Korea. According to the independent campus newspaper, the Purdue Exponent, at least 100 Chinese graduate students who finished all application steps and received offers had their acceptance revoked before the semester started, and they received no explanation. Some of these students had already signed leases, bought plane tickets, or made solid plans to come to the U.S. Several students and staff members described the move as a soft expulsion. Faculty members stated that starting in October, the university pushed the same message during department meetings and private conversations. Even if a department admitted a student, it would be highly unlikely for the application to be approved by the graduate school. Multiple professors said they were told to be wary of applicants from the listed countries during initial screening. Some were even instructed not to advance any Chinese applicants past the first round. Purdue is a world-class university with 13 Nobel laureates and is famously known as the mother of American aerospace. According to the American International Education Report, Open Doors, Purdue ranks 9th in the entire United States for international student enrollment, making it one of the most popular universities for students from abroad. However, Purdue's admission data reveals that the number of Chinese students has been dropping for years. 10 years ago, there were 718 Chinese freshmen. 5 years ago, there were 315. Shockingly, for fall 2024, only 14 Chinese freshmen were enrolled. This trend is not unique to Purdue. Many U.S. universities, including Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, the University of Illinois, the University of Maryland, and the University of Southern California, have tightened their review of students and research collaborations in sensitive fields. On September 19th, a special House committee focused on China submitted a report to Congress. The report claimed that 58 U.S. universities have close ties to the Chinese military or government and recommended denying all visa applications from students from those institutions. The committee also demanded that 6 American universities provide information about the Chinese undergraduates they currently enroll. Against this backdrop, Purdue's changes in admission and research compliance have drawn intense attention. American universities, especially public research universities like Purdue, depend heavily on full tuition from international students, particularly those from China. International students often make up 20 to 30% of enrollment and contribute hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Losing these students would significantly shrink a university's budget. So why are American universities willing to give up that revenue rather than continue admitting Chinese students? The main reasons come from deeper forces, pressures far greater than short-term financial loss. First is national security. As U.S.-China technology competition intensifies, the U.S. government sees China as a major strategic rival. Officials worry that Chinese students, especially graduate students in STEM, might use the visa system to access sensitive technologies, gather intelligence, steal intellectual property, or eventually replace U.S. talent. The FBI has warned that the Chinese government uses graduate students and postdoctoral researchers in engineering, science, and math as non-traditional collectors of intellectual property. A U.S. Commission on Intellectual Property Theft estimated that China's activities cause roughly $600 billion in economic losses every year. In March 2025, the House Select Committee on China sent a letter to Purdue President Meng Chang, calling student visas Beijing's Trojan Horse. The committee demanded data on Chinese student enrollment and participation in federally funded research. Purdue's own report showed that in fall 2024, 28.7% of Chinese graduate students had participated in federally funded research projects, something the committee labeled as high risk. In his response, Purdue Provost Patrick Wolf wrote, "Purdue University always puts the interests of American citizens first, focusing on our country's national security and the education of American students in essential fields." Purdue has indeed tightened its research security measures to protect federally funded work, including screening researchers in sensitive fields and monitoring international collaborations. Much of this specifically focuses on preventing espionage and intellectual property theft linked to China. The second reason is the threat of losing federal funding. For a university president in the U.S., one of the biggest responsibilities is securing funding, and the federal government is the largest source of money for American research universities. Schools like Purdue fear that if they continue admitting Chinese students, they may be labeled as helping a foreign adversary, which could trigger federal investigations or sanctions. Congressional reports have already used Purdue as an example to push for nationwide restrictions on Chinese students. The administration's pressure comes from a real fear of losing federal support. As a public university, more than 40% of Purdue's annual budget for research comes from federal grants, hundreds of millions of dollars. This is far more than the tuition revenue from international students. If Purdue is seen as a security risk, that federal funding could be cut off. Losing that money would be far worse than losing tuition from a few thousand Chinese students. Third is the president's strong anti-communist stance. Purdue's current president is also the first Chinese American to lead the university. Purdue President Mong Chong is a member of the U.S. National Academy of Inventors, a foreign member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences, and a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He was born in Tianjin, China in 1977. He entered Stanford University in 1995. In 2017, at just 40 years old, he became Dean of Purdue's College of Engineering. On January 1, 2023, he became Purdue's 13th president. When he took office, he wrote, "It is the highest and most humbling honor to serve as the president of Purdue University, the most remarkable land-grant institution in the land of the free." Some Chinese students shared on social media that after Mong Chong took office, he immediately began cutting ties, suspending all partnerships with universities in China. Mong Chong was once part of former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's advisory circle and helped shape several U.S. technology policies toward China. Pompeo, known as a hardline anti-communist figure during the Trump administration, pushed sanctions against Huawei. He targeted other Chinese companies in telecommunications, AI, and military-related industries. During Trump's first term, Pompeo created the Global Technology Office in late 2019. He appointed Mong Chong as its director. The office was designed to counter security threats posed by Chinese technology and promote Silicon Valley-style innovation as a response to what it described as Beijing's authoritarian model. Chang's most notable work was at the intersection of diplomacy and technology policy, especially through the Clean Network Initiative, which encouraged U.S. allies to remove Huawei equipment from their system. In addition, Chong has long supported Taiwan's democracy and human rights issues. He has publicly praised Taiwan as a beacon of freedom in the Indo-Pacific. Because of these positions, he has attracted strong attention on Chinese media and social platforms where he is frequently labeled as pro-America and anti-communist. This year, in fact, the U.S. State Department and the Department of Homeland Security signaled that they would begin accelerated visa revocations and heightened screening for students from mainland China, Hong Kong, and Macau, especially those linked to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields. According to the State Department, the Chinese government monitors Chinese students and mobilizes them through the Chinese Students and Scholars Association, CSSA. Some CSSA chapters in the U.S. have openly acknowledged receiving guidance, support, or funding from Chinese consulates. At the time, State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said in a press conference, "When it comes to keeping America safe, the United States will not tolerate the CCP's exploitation of U.S. universities, of U.S. research, intellectual property, or technologies to grow its military power, conduct intelligence collection, or repress voices of opposition. She stressed that a visa is not a right but a privilege. She said she wanted students from China to understand that national security is taken very seriously and that the U.S. is watching their visa applications closely. She also said that both parents and students need to understand that coming to study in the U.S. is about gaining skills, receiving a better education, and building a better future, not about political motives or radical ideas. Throughout this year, the U.S. government has rolled out a series of stricter policies for international students. Starting at the end of May for F1, J1, and M1 visa categories, applicants were required to submit all social media accounts from the past 5 years, and officers specifically screened for anti-American sentiments. Reports say that the U.S. has already revoked more than 6,000 international student visas as an early result of the Trump administration's tighter review process. Chinese students have been hit the hardest, especially those applying in sensitive fields like AI and semiconductors. Screenings now cover not only personal background information, but also political views, social media activity, and even family background. Under these restrictions, visa interviews in Beijing and Guangzhou had rejection rates as high as 40% from May to August, and 70% of those rejected were applying for computer science or engineering. The sudden policy changes left many Chinese students anxious, and countless stories and pleas for help appeared across social media. My visa was rejected again. When it happened, I didn't even feel anything at first. I was just speechless. But when I saw the reason for the rejection, I broke down instantly. I wanted to cry. The reason they gave was unclear study purpose. A student named Wang Qin shared online that he had been rejected twice. He completed his undergraduate studies at an elite university in China and earned his master's degree from the University of Electronic Science and Technology of China. He had even been awarded a full scholarship for a PhD program in computer science at a U.S. university. On June 5, 2025, he attended his first visa interview in Beijing. He was asked to submit additional documents, and his passport was taken. After he sent in the extra documents, he received a rejection notice on July 30th. The stated reasons were strong immigrant intent and unclear study purpose. The first setback didn't stop him. On August 13th, he went to Guangzhou for his second interview. The interview was surprisingly short. The officer only asked which school he applied to, why he chose it, and where he completed his master's degree. But in the end, the officer still handed him a rejection letter. His experience struck a nerve on social media, where many other students shared similar stories of being rejected even after submitting all requested documents. Ren Wenyu works in a field that combines mechanical engineering and computer engineering. When he was pursuing his master's degree in the U.S., he once went through more than 40 days of administrative processing. Even so, he was not prepared for the long wait this time. He told Chinese media that it has been nearly 100 days since his interview, and his visa status has not changed at all. He keeps sending follow-up emails, but the only replies he receives are automated messages. His school has advised him to postpone his enrollment to next spring. In conversations with other students, he found out that almost everyone studying mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and related fields all fell into long administrative processing after the interviews in May. And even for those who do receive visas, many are valid for only 1 year, creating major uncertainty about their future status in the United States. These individual stories reflect how U.S. universities are tightening their admissions reviews. On a broader level, this trend shows that the U.S.-China tech Cold War is now spilling over into education and research. The Chinese leadership has committed to a national plan aimed at challenging American power and reshaping the global order, creating structural confrontation between the two countries. Beijing criticizes the U.S. for not honoring its principles of openness. But this ignores a basic fact. The U.S. is under no obligation to share its most advanced technologies with a hostile competitor. In recent weeks, the U.S. Congress has been preparing new legislation that would block students, researchers, and certain professionals from 5 countries, including China, from working in sensitive STEM fields for reasons of national security. The bill would bar citizens of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and Cuba from holding positions in U.S. government-funded STEM programs or research labs. Chinese nationals are expected to be the most heavily affected. If passed, this proposal would further intensify technology and academic tensions between China and the United States. Senior commentator Lan Shu says the main reason Chinese students are facing these difficulties is the Chinese Communist Party's ambitions for global dominance. He argues that after the West accepted China into the World Trade Organization in the early 2000s, many hoped a growing Chinese middle class would eventually push for political reform. Instead, after 20 years where China's GDP grew tenfold, the result has been China's global expansion and mounting pressure on the free world. Lan points out that many Chinese students learn cutting-edge technology in the U.S., but do not embrace democratic values. When they return home, they apply their knowledge to China's military-industrial enterprises. The most famous example is the Military-Civil Fusion Program, directed by the Chinese Communist Party's Military-Civil Fusion Commission, chaired by General Secretary Xi Jinping. Western countries, he says, have no choice but to protect themselves.